Welcome back to the GoLoud Sessions. This week, I am delighted to be joined by Sara Kennedy. She is the founder of Irish Wedding Blog, and we are chatting ahead of the launch of her podcast, which GoLoud are hosting, very exciting, called Real Weddings with Sara. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's great to be here. All locked
Tell
in.
me, when are we ever not? Like, hopefully we'll actually be able to see each other in person soon, but
I know.
Zoom does the job. It's fine.
Sure,
It's fine.
grand.
Tell me how you got involved with weddings and the industry at large.
Okay, so I suppose we're going back a good few years. So I did my degree in hospitality management. And so I've always wanted to work in hospitality, but it wasn't until I did my internship in Chicago with actually an Irish hotelier, John Fitzpatrick. There was a wedding going on at the time in the hotel that I was doing my internship, and I just fell in love with it. And so when I came home, I worked in a couple of hotels and operations, and it was grand. But an opportunity came up as a wedding coordinator for two hotels with the Slattery family. They have the Station House Hotel in Kilmeston in County Meath. So I worked with them for I was wedding coordinator there for a good 3 years. So that was really my jump into weddings. I was hands-on. It was just amazing. So I just kind of fell in love with it then. And then once you're working in it, you're very astute to it, you're very passionate about it, you get a lot out of it. And then I started working more in marketing. So I moved to another hotel group where I would have looked after all of their marketing. I always would have leaned in on weddings. And then the big piece was I went back to college to do my digital masters in DCU. And one of the components we had to do is we had to do a blog. Like, it was standard. You had to do a blog as part of your module. So I set up a blog, and I didn't really have anything else to talk about apart from weddings, anything that like consumers might be interested in reading. So I set that up, and literally it just grew legs because I started giving insider tips. So nobody at that time was kind of going behind the scenes talking about, this is how you do a bill. This is how these are the things you need to look for when you go to do a wedding show round. So I came at it from a very different angle, and it just grew legs. And from then I've always been really in tune with it. I love weddings, and I'm just naturally drawn to them. So I suppose that's really the long-winded story.
How has the last year and the pandemic impacted you and weddings in general? Has that been really hard to watch? Because it's touched every like aspect of life in general. But I know even myself, my sister got married last year after 2 postponements, and we had the best day out ever. But that journey there, God, it was so tough for people.
Yeah, it's definitely a test of mental endurance. Like, I remember working as a wedding coordinator when the recession hit last time. And it was literally, I just remember a month of constantly sitting at my desk with my hands in my head, with the phone ringing nonstop, and just going, that's another cancellation. What are we going to do here? So this was really different because you've kind of been dragged along on a little string. And I think this is worse. It's kind of like this slow and painful torture because, we think it's, okay, 4 weeks and it'll get better. 6 weeks, it's going to get better. And what's happened is it's just, you get a little bit of airspace, and then boom, you're hit again with another lockdown. So look, yeah, like your sister, I think the big thing has been, for me, just looking at the pain and utter distress couples are going through. And I know that sounds like really over the top, but it's not, because there's a lot of finance that couples have locked up with this money. There's loved ones that can't travel home that are big core pieces of the wedding. There's people that are really vulnerable that can't be there for a very special day. And like, we have to remember that with weddings, we can be very critical and pass them off. Oh, it's a wedding, it's this, it's that, but it's a very emotional day for a couple. So I think for me personally, the impact, I'm married, I've had my day out, but just that feeling of helplessness that you can't do anything for the couples apart from help them understand and navigate mentally through the whole process. And I think that's really where the podcast is coming at the right time. We could have got to studio and done this a lot quicker, but I think it's coming at the right time just when people really need some light relief and a little bit of uplift, around weddings. But there's no doubt about it. Myself, I find it just, I feel for the couple so much. And as well, like, even for myself, I would normally be up and down the country doing a good 6 to 8 wedding events in January alone, and they're gone. So to not be kind of engaging with the audience and meeting them in person is just, that's a hard one. But it's really just that feeling for the couple. I really feel it, and particularly the wedding suppliers, because anyone that works in weddings is not in it for a quick buck. They're in it because they really love what they do. They're really creative people. So to not be able to be creative or to serve your couples, and particularly where you've got restrictions where weddings can go ahead, but your part of the wedding industry isn't allowed to go ahead, like bans, like that is crushing. And it's like, I'm seeing that other side of it where, you know, people are worried about their jobs, their financial security. And, you know, it is an industry that is, it's very vulnerable at the moment. And I think that's really the hard part to watch as an onlooker, more so than being, you know, in it.
Talk to me about the podcast then, because obviously that's why we're here and we're very excited about it. How did that come about? Was that always kind of part of the plan, or was it a case of, from your experience, you were having these great conversations and it was just a case of, why are we not recording this?
Yeah, do you know what it is? So myself and Ruth Devani, who's the producer, she's absolutely amazing. Myself and Ruth were in DCU together, and we did our digital program together. And I was having a chat with a colleague, Lisa, and she said, "Sarah, you really need to get a podcast. You really need to start putting this stuff down." I was like, "Oh God, sounds like a lot of effort." And I remember it was November. I was actually out in the Station House Hotel, having a bit of lunch, and I rang Ruth and I said, "Look, would you be interested in doing a podcast?" And Ruth is like, "Absolutely." And I'm like, "Why don't we do celeb weddings? Why don't we let's get the really good, fun stories out. Let's go out, go behind the scenes, find out about their weddings." And Ruth was like, it took very little convincing there. So I think that was really it. I've always wanted to do something where it told the story of weddings more so than the advice thing, because I give a lot of advice on the blog. I have written a book and there's lots of advice in that. So I really wanted to make sure that it was, I think, just more light relief, because I think that's the one thing with the podcast. What I love to tune into any of the podcasts that I listen to is something you can stick on while you're walking, and you don't really have to be making note of things. You know, you can just really enjoy it and zone out and you know, go to a different parallel. So that was really it. We just wanted to make something that was really light, fun, but emotive at the same time, so people could get a real sense of the emotion and the work behind marriage as well.
You've got some big names for it. Like, it's very exciting, the lineup, and I really can't wait to listen to some of the interviews. Can you tease some of them? Can you talk about, give a little
sure, absolutely. Well, like I'll put it right. So every single guest that we've recorded with have either been really surprising, right? Really surprising, like blown us away with, you know, not really having the expectation that they were going to say different things or go there and be so explicit about their marriage. But for me, as somebody who is, you know, a massive fan of weddings and obsessed with them, to interview Monte from Say Yes to the Dress, for me was like Ruth will tell you, the day in studio where we had him, like I actually turned up with makeup on, even though he can't see me. I was just like, oh God, Monte, like, oh, you have to turn, if you're coming to Monte, you got to turn up. Like, he was just incredible to get that half hour with them, you know. Oh, he's just amazing. So Monte was great, and he was actually really, you know, this is the thing with the podcast. Like, I never thought it would go like this, but everyone that we have interviewed, and I don't know how it ended up getting that way, but everyone goes deep, you know. With Monte, we were talking about, you know, marriage and family and all of those things. And, you know, he lost his mother about 5 years ago, and literally in the middle of it, he broke down. He got really upset. And you know, to not be able to hug a person who's crying, you know, that was really, you know, it was so bizarre, because you'd kind of take for granted that with the podcast, you get in, you're delivering a message and you're doing an interview. But this was a really real moment, you know, that we had, a very tender moment with somebody of massive stature in the wedding industry, Monte from Say Yes to the Dress Atlanta. Like, you know, people live and breathe Monte, and that was phenomenal. And then, you know, you've got characters like Keith Walsh, Mario Rosenstock, who are notorious, you know, in their areas, being real comedic personalities, but can be a bit serious at times as well. To have those, like, we were very lucky, we were able to do those interviews in studio, and they went deep, and they were very, like, I couldn't believe how open they were about themselves as person, and particularly as men, and just being so exposing. Like, they literally just opened up the can and just let it out, you know, and talked. And that was really, really good to hear from a male perspective in that way. And then you've got some beautiful weddings. Like, it was lovely to hear, you know, we've Lisa Cannon on, we've Grace Mungy from Face by Grace, and you know, the whole thing around the people that can't be there on your wedding day, we went into that. And that's a really kind of, that's a piece that we kind of forget about when we're caught up in the planning. And that's difficult for the brides and grooms, that, you know, they don't have, you know, that special someone there. And how do you mark that? And how do you feel a presence when they're not there? And it was, you know, just stuff like that. And then you've got the real funny stuff, like you've got you know, just the kind of the disasters, the things that go wrong, and then the things that go absolutely right. And you know, we're kicking off with Chupi Sweetman, who is, you know, an absolute legend. So, you know, her rings, her jewelry collection, and she's just such a great personality herself. That is just like chicken soup for the soul, listening to Chupi. She's just amazing. So like, we've got an unbelievable cast between Chupi, Monte, we've Blonna Tracy, Suzanne Kane, of course, who's hilarious. She's brilliant. We actually have a couple. We've one couple on, the Saccone Jolies, who, controversial couple. They are hilarious, brilliant, and very insightful. And they actually did their podcast with us on their date night. So, you know, it was almost like having a marriage session, a marriage counseling session, you know, just to, because you've got the actual couple in the room. So that was really amazing. And then we had Kat Williams, who is the rock and roll bride, who is in the UK. She is an international global success in weddings. She's the Rock and Roll Bride magazine. She has a real, like, you know, no nonsense personality, and she's just very straight through, cuts through the messing. It was really good. She's just so direct. So it was really good to just cut through it with her on that side of weddings. But then you've got the likes of Don O'Neill, the designer, with his husband Pascal, who are in New York, and just the romance and just that feeling. And I think that was one thing I was really conscious that I wanted to get you know, draw out from Don's story particularly, was, you know, growing up in a small town in Ireland and coming back to his hometown. And, you know, for him, leaving such a small town Ireland so many years ago, as someone who is gay, who's going on, embracing themselves, being who they have to be, and coming back to that small town, who lined up on the street cheering as himself and Pascal walked hand in hand to get married. Like, that's not what would have happened those 20 years ago, you know, when Don set off on that Aer Lingus flight to New York, you know. So it was just really that, those stories that, you know, you don't hear that often, but you know, from those sorts of guests, they just have really interesting stories. So, you know, I think there is a fantastic lineup, and everybody's coming at everything from a very different perspective. So no podcast is the same. Everyone has a different story to tell, and you've got the good, you've got the hard hitting, and just the information in between as well. Like, there's some unbelievable, like, every time we recorded something, I'd come home and I'd have a chat with my own husband about, you know, there was always a takeaway, but overall, across all of the couples, everybody agreed that, look, for a marriage to work, communication is key, you know. And that was great to see that thread running along the whole way through.
I know we're on season 1 and I'm probably galloping ahead of myself, but it's something I ask every guest. Absolute blue sky thinking. You can have them on the phone tomorrow, or you can have them in person tomorrow. Who would you love to interview for like season 2 or beyond?
Oh, well, like, obviously Kim and Kanye.
That's just great, like, answer.
You know, like, I think if we could have a session, because obviously if the tabloids are true, they're, you know, living separate lives, like, maybe I could be the one that, like, helps them back together. Like, it could be it. And then maybe we could renew their vows, and we could get them to renew them in Ireland, and they'd invite me. So I'd love to do that. I'd look, absolutely would love that. But there's a lot of really good Irish, like, there's so many new engagements at the moment. So I'd love to, you know, tap into some of those engagements as well. A lot of really good Irish ones. And yeah, I think I would just really, really love to get Kim and Kanye, and complete out of the mad bag, of course. But on top of that, like, I'd love to get someone like Hillary Clinton to talk about her marriage. I'd love that, right? And she'd never do it. But I'd love that. And or like anybody that's just a little bit not the typical person that would normally talk about marriage. Like, you know, I'd love to get, and I'd actually love to get people who aren't married that would not like to get married. I really think I need to hear that viewpoint as well, because I don't agree nor disagree. I believe that marriage is a choice for individually, and it can be the right thing for some and not for others. But, you know, I'd love to hear from people who are not anti-marriage, but just don't really put a weight on it, or couples that have been together like a really, really long time and just don't see the point. Like, I'd love to talk to those as well, because I'd love to see, like, because that's the question I ask in this, is like, what did you think before when you were getting married, or if you intend to get married, what do you think marriage would bring that your relationship didn't already have? So I would love to explore that with, you know, a different, you know, audience that haven't gone that far.
I have to ask this as well, because like weddings are such a thing. They're an event, they're a circus, usually like pre-COVID, during COVID, they always are such a thing.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you must have a mad story that you dish out at events of like a crazy thing that you've heard it's happened at a wedding or involved at a wedding, maybe like a bride or groomzilla. Could you share? Could you divulge? Do you have one for us?
Well, you see, I have to be very, very careful because, you know, client confidentiality and all that. But like, you know, there's always the fights, right? There's always the fights that are like off the wall, you know. And what I will say is, it doesn't matter how much money's gone into a wedding, what status the couple are, who's whatever. At a wedding, a fight can break out amongst the finest of people, and ambulances can be called. I think one of my favorite ones, you know, like, you'll always get bride, and can I also say you can also get groomzillas. But you know, there would always be people with quirks, you know, the things that they just can't have, you know, that they can't have around them. In particular, like, and it's so funny when you write things on a file, because when you're dealing with a couple, you're just like, this is completely normal because I'm doing my job. But then you look back on the file and you're like, did I actually have to write that down? But like, you know, there are certain things like, I don't want to hear any forks scraping along a plate. I don't want any newspapers in the building. Newspapers freak me out. I don't want to see any balloons. And it's all these little things like that are must, you know, you can't have within a 2-mile radius of me. So it's a lot of that sort of stuff. But realistically, it's more the there's always a fight. And it may not be a physical fight. It could be just the sniping across tables and dirty looks and all that sort of thing. And there's always something going on. And of course, with drink, it always makes it 10 times worse. But like, yeah, it's more like, I do always remember a particular bride in her planning who had just like, and this was always the thing I always remember, when you meet a couple, when you first book them, they're so different by the time it gets to, you know, 6 weeks before their wedding, because they're so comfortable with you at that stage. And it feels like every time you go into the room, you're having a counseling session with them. So it's because they're letting out all their stress, and it's just that time for them to just offload, which is fantastic. But I do remember a girl who it had gone just so far stress wise for her, but her bridesmaid got pregnant. And for a good few weeks, her bridesmaid just couldn't tell her because she was scared. And then anyway, she told her, but she had gotten heavily pregnant, dresses were in, all that sort of thing. And I just remember the bride that day had just gone absolutely bananas. She just let it all out in the room, and she was picking up things and throwing it and going, like, you know, giving out about her. And I just remember sitting there going, oh, sweet mother divine, will I come out of this alive, like, or with a black eye, like, how is this going to go? But, you know, there's all those different kind of triggers. But I think overall, I think brides get a bad rep for the bridezilla piece. But I would say that sometimes the grooms are 5,000 times worse, like, to the point where I would have grooms where they're like, and can you tell me the last time that those pipes got cleaned for the Guinness, you know, because I've got a lot of people that love Guinness. And I'm like, give me strength, right? So like, there's also that sort of stuff that goes on, you know. So so look, that's as much as I can reveal as possible, but there are certain things that will never leave this head.
Absolutely understandable. What wedding trends are we expected to see for 2021? Again, I know it's a totally different climate or whatever, but I mean, there's still things like the dress and everything like that. Are we seeing anything kind of different, or trends are emerging?
I think so. Well, I think that the trend is the current situation, really, and I think we're going to have that anyway explicitly for the first part of the year. So I think what we're going to see is a lot more kind of focus put into, rather than people rushing a 25 people wedding, people are really going to focus on what that visually looks like, that 25 to 50 people wedding, making it smaller, condensed, but richer visual experience. I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think we're going to start to see, because I'm already seeing it now with just pictures being sent to me, just real visual editorial style weddings, because when you've got a big group of people to cater for, you don't get that opportunity to spend your money in that way, in terms of your flower arrangements and your table centerpieces, etc. So I think a lot more focus on that. In terms of fashion, definitely seeing people going for, getting married legally now, but then having the party later. So with that, having two different outfits. So very much going for that registry, city look. So having your trouser suit like Laura Whitmore had last week, that we saw that picture, which was planned by Tara Fay, fantastic looking wedding. So that trouser suit, that short, the midi dress, a lot of that, but then saving that, the bigger dress that they've bought for when the party happens in 2021, 2022. Definitely going to be seeing, particularly because of Lily Allen as well, she went in for that mini dress. I think you're going to see a few more rocking that in the summertime, particularly if we do stick with more of the simplified 25, 50 people weddings. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. But then I am definitely seeing a lot more demand for very simple cuts and looks. So, if I go back maybe 2 years ago, a year to 2 years ago, it was definitely all about, there was a lot more sparkle, a lot more of this kind of real Iranian, Israeli influence, where it's by a brand called Berta, where it's like laser cuts, seeing through, lots of kind of subtle diamante running through it, and really fitted cut. Whereas I'm seeing a lot more kind of, I think people have got a lot more reflective as well, and they're stripping back a little bit more, and they're going for more of those, non-decorative dresses. They're just simple lines that are just really flattering, but maybe more edgy in their cut. So, the higher shoulder pads, the plunging necklines and plunging backs, but, keeping it really, really simple. But I do think probably when people get more confidence in weddings, I think, and start to see the 100 happening, the 120, 40, they'll go back into that big dress mood again. But yeah, definitely more that tailored look is what people are that's what they're flocking to.
I'm loving it. I'm weak for the Instagrams and the trouser suit. I mean, I'm not even sure if it's something I'd ever wear myself, but to see it on other people, it's so classic.
It's
so nice.
But it does, it really stands out. And I think it is a great alternative if you're getting married now but have the party later. I think it's a fantastic move. I think it's really, really a real smart look, and you'll get wear out of that. Even on holidays, you'll wear your white pants again, so, we ever get away again someday.
Oh, fingers crossed. Sara, where else can people find out more about you and about Irish Wedding Blog?
So I have a website, irishweddingblog.ie, and I'm across all social media at Irish Wedding Blog. So I'm there. I'm there to help if anybody has any questions, or if they're feeling the pain of trying to postpone and replan a wedding. Throw the questions at me. We'll fire it up to the audience and get some feedback, or I can help you straight away. So look, that's what I'm there for.
I'm so looking forward to listening to Real Weddings with Sara, and you should all be too. Launches this week, so go check it out. Sara, thank you so much for joining me on the GoLoud Sessions.
Thank you.